Coming up on episode 203 of Wheel Bearings, in the garage, we've got the 2021 Mazda CX-9 Signature, the Mercedes-Benz E450 wagon, the Hyundai Sonata, and the Aston Martin DBX. And in the news, we talk about the Volvo Concept Recharge and some of Volvo's plans for their upcoming electric vehicles and automated driving systems, GM's investment in a low-cost, low-carbon lithium producer for their upcoming batteries, and the Concours d'Elegance of America moving to Detroit. And then we wrap up with some listener questions, all coming up next. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia.
At Arizona State University, we've made online education better, smarter, and more personalized so you can go further in your aspiring field.
I decided to pursue medicine once I realized that ASU did have the online program for biological sciences. You're still required to learn the same curriculum. You're still being tested on the same content that anyone would be tested on in person. The comprehensiveness of the program prepared me so well for medical school.
Explore over 300 programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Welcome to episode 203 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
I'm Nicole Wakeland, and this week we'll go with sports car market.
And I'm Roberto Baldwin, and we're going to say TechCrunch this week.
All right. And I think sports car market is probably a good choice, Nicole, given some of the listener questions we have at the end of the show.
I think it actually is.
So you had something interesting in your garage this week, something interesting and something slightly less interesting.
Which one do you want me to start with? Okay, so I'll start with...
I'll leave it up to you.
Okay. And people will just have to guess which is which by the time the segment is over.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
It's going to be hard, guys. So I have a 2021 Hyundai Sonata Limited, which is a sedan, and it's a good sedan. It looks good. I actually had a Hyundai Sonata not that long ago, so I'm kind of like, oh, hey, we're back for a second roll. I like the Sonata. I like Hyundais because I think they actually pack a lot of features in for a really good price. I mean, that's like the Hyundai and Kia way. You get a lot of features in at lower levels on the trim lineup for less money than you do with other OEMs. This one, which is like pretty well tricked out, is $35,000 on the money, like exactly $35,000. I want to know who actually made that happen.
And that including delivery?
Perfect. That includes delivery. Wow. And the carpeted floor mats, which were an additional $155. Yeah, exactly $35,000 with delivery. So I'm a fan of this. It's got a 1.6 liter turbocharged engine. It's got 180 horsepower, so it moves when you hit the gas. It's smooth. It's quiet, which is what you want. I mean, sedans are just, you know, they're nice cruisers. You're focusing on having people be comfortable, and it does that. And it's not harsh. It's not something that you're going to win any races in. I mean, it has enough power and it gets moving. It's not like it's underpowered, but this is at its heart like an efficient sedan that does the job of carrying you nicely and comfortably and having the features you want in terms of things like this one has a 10.25 inch touchscreen navigation system. You've got your Apple CarPlay, you've got your, what's the other one? Android Auto. You've got all of that stuff. You have a really good suite of standard safety, which I always appreciate because there's still some OEMs that, you know, they'll put one or two things on a base trim and then you really have to start going up if you want to either get
We're looking
standard.
at you, GM.
Yeah, right? Like, it's like, oh, we have all these safety features. Oh, wait, two are included on the base trim.
Yeah, we have backup camera. You're like, you know, no, you can't say that anymore. You can't say backup camera.
Right. It's like that should not
anything
be on
that
the
is
list
required by law cannot be included in the list because everybody has to have it.
See, and I'm looking at their list, and nothing on this list is required by law. So go Hyundai. So this one, see, here's the list of the advanced safety technology: blind spot collision avoidance, rear cross traffic, forward collision avoidance with pedestrian detection, park collision avoidance, front and back, surround. Oh, they did surround view monitor, but I guess that's fancier than just a regular rear view camera, right?
Well, but yeah, that gets the cameras on the side and on the front and
yeah. So I guess technically that counts because it's more than
you have
just
that drone
that
view.
counts. Right,
Yeah.
you get the everything view. Front and rear parking sensors, remote smart parking assist and blind view monitor, and safe exit warning. That's all part of this. And your exactly $35,000 sedan.
Bam.
Bam, boom, for exactly 35. So I'm a fan of the Sonata. I was a fan of it the first time I drove it. Hey, I'm still a fan of it the second time I drove it. I don't have a lot of complaints about it. I don't think I had limited last time. I feel like I had a different...
No, I mean, this
one.
time
I
you
was
had the
trying
limited.
Oh, this time, yes. This time I have the limited.
Okay.
Yes. So, I mean, and it looks good. Sedans have this tendency to either be styled to look absolutely dishwater dull and they're boring and you wouldn't even notice them. They have this sort of silver like accent sort of that runs along the hood kind of. It's like, it looks good. It's a good looking car. It attracts your attention. I'm a Hyundai fan. I like Hyundais in general because I just feel like they're an unbelievable value. And this one is quiet and smooth and comfy. Plenty of room in the back seat for... My husband sat behind my daughter who had been playing with the seats and they were like way back. He's 6'3", he still fit back there. So, yeah, cool. So that was one of the cars I had.
So the engine in that one, I think that's the 1.6 turbo, right?
Yeah, it's the 1.6 turbo. It's 180 horsepower, 195 pound-feet of torque. So it's a decent amount of get up and go. Like you push the gas and you're going to move. You're not going to have trouble merging with highway traffic. You're not going to have trouble trying to find that extra bit of power if you're passing someone who's a little slow on the highway. And it's got an 8-speed automatic with paddle shifters if you so choose. Right? Yeah, you missed Roberto's little imitation
everybody
of paddle
driving
shifters.
a Sonata is
Paddle shifting.
pretending they're
Well, so this is really funny. So my daughter, she's 17, by the way, just as you don't think she's like a toddler or something. She's 17. She's like, what are those? Because for some reason, they just caught her attention. They're very large paddle shifters on the that are mounted. And I told her, and she's like, why would you want those on this? And I was like, oh, ouch. Correct. And she's 17, and she just knows that from the few cars that she's driven and from riding along in cars with me. I'm like, well, maybe you want to feel like
you want to downshift a little bit more. You don't want you want to control like in the just, you're at the autocross with your Sonata.
Right, like you do, like one does on every weekend. Yeah.
Well, that is the beauty of autocross though, is you can take anything, literally anything, at least anything that is self-propelled and run it. So you could take a Sonata.
Well, you could. I mean, there. What's the thing? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, you could take the Sonata on an autocross course, but it's not something that I think I'm going out on a limb here. But I don't think the typical Hyundai Sonata owner would do that. But if there's one listening out there who takes their Sonata and does autocross with it, please feel free to message us.
Oh, send us a video.
Send us a video. That's what I want
please.
to see.
Yeah.
Using the paddle shifters.
I am a fan of the Hyundai Sonata, so seeing a Hyundai Sonata autocross would make my day.
Somebody must have one they can do that.
Yeah. Someone's making an appointment right now.
Right this minute.
The thing I like about the Sonata, is it's got enough style without seeming over-designed like a certain Toyota midsize sedan, which can be a little bit over the top. I think it's got the right balance. You talked about a lot of midsize sedans kind of disappear into the background. This one definitely doesn't do that, but it's got just enough that it doesn't whack you upside the head all the time.
It's currently sitting in my driveway with a far flashier vehicle that it doesn't look completely overwhelmed by, and I kind of thought, that's something to hold your own against what's sitting next to it in the driveway right now.
So the other one is the underwhelming vehicle then, right?
The other one is the completely underwhelming, not exciting, not attention-getting vehicle at all. I have a 21 Aston Martin DBX, which is slightly more than the 35,000. Let's see. It's
just add a couple of zeros.
Yeah, a lot of zeros. So it's 176,900, but as equipped, sitting in my driveway, $219,186. So you could buy for what, six Hyundai Sonatas or an Aston Martin DBX. Take your pick.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. Seems reasonable. You could buy 6 cars or 1 car. So. And truly, it's a really stylish looking car, but it's funny, sometimes when you have a very fancy press car and you have just a normal, what the rest of us humans drive, suddenly what the rest of us humans drive looks really sort of sad and dull sitting in the driveway next to it. It actually, truly, the Sonata is like, hey, you look pretty good sitting next to that car that is 6 times your price. Like it did well. So the Aston Martin DBX, it's so funny to even talk about a car like this. If you want to buy a car that's $219,000, you're just going to kind of do it. You're not going to look to see, you just have to want
You've already made
that Aston Martin. Like you've made your decision. You're not like, well, let me see. Is the fuel economy, is it up to snuff? It's like, no, I want that. Buy it. Here's my money. I kind of feel that's how you are if you're buying cars at that price level.
The thing about, I think the thing that's strange about the premise of the DBX is I'm old enough to remember that the idea of SUVs from brands like Porsche and Aston Martin and Lamborghini was just completely anathema. You wouldn't even consider it. I mean, an Aston Martin SUV, that's insane, and yet here it is.
And it was funny, I put up a couple of pictures on social media. I put some pictures on Twitter, and I put some pictures just on my personal Facebook page because I always share what I have, especially when it's really fun. And there were actually people who were sort of like, gosh, how desperate are they that they would do an SUV? Who does that at a luxury performance car? It's like,
everyone.
Actually, everybody.
Pretty much.
It's not.
And I think, desperation's not an entirely inappropriate word to use for Aston Martin in the last few years. They have had some financial challenges and, had to be refinanced. So, I think that's a reasonable word to use in that context.
But I think even if they hadn't had their financial missteps, this car would still be here now.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like they're like, we have to do this because of our finances. It's no, we just have to do this because this is what you need to do in 2021. Like you have to have an SUV, or are you even making cars anymore?
Lamborghini's best-selling car ever is the Urus.
Yeah. Urus. I feel like every time I say the name of that, I say it differently.
Every time, when I did the video of it, I had to keep going over to the PR person who said Urus. About Urus? She said Urus. Urus? And I might be saying it wrong again. Who knows? I just kept walking over to her and be like, wait. Urus or Urus? She's like, Urus. I'm like, all right. And I walk back over and I do my little stand-up about the car, and then I'm like, oh, shit. And I walk back over.
See, I can't ever do a video on that car because I will never say it the same way twice. It'll be a different way every time the word comes out of my mouth. So,
well, that makes it more interesting.
But DBX, I can say, right? It just makes it more exciting. It's a fancy car thing. You say it however you want to say it. You're going to pay a couple $100,000. You call it whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's kind of exactly what you'd expect an Aston Martin SUV to be. It's unbelievably stunning and luxurious inside. There's leather everything. There's wood everything. There's chrome everything. That an Alcantara headliner. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Drives beautifully. You have 6 different drive modes in this thing. There's 2 that are off-road modes. I really want to know who's taking their $220,000 Aston Martin DBX off-road. I'm sure there's one guy, but like off-road to his cabin where he has his valet park it. And then there's like Sport and Sport Plus mode, and you can feel it change as you go through the modes. But with the favorite thing in the Sport Plus, it gets so loud, it's obnoxious. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. It's like it goes from like a nice little purr to like in your face. It is so loud. And it's fun to drive. I mean, it's an absolute joy to drive it. The only thing I don't like, there is something I don't like about this. I don't like the infotainment system because it doesn't have the touchscreen. It has the spinny little Mercedes-Benz type touchpad thing, like a little rectangle that sits on it, and then there's like a dial underneath it. Not a fan, but I hate not having a touchscreen. It's just I hate it.
Typically, the more expensive the more money you spend on a car, on a luxury car, especially from a niche automaker, the worse the infotainment system gets. It's usually how.
So
it works.
Everything else is brilliant, but the infotainment system made me a little stabby. But other than that, sure. If I had $219,186, I would buy that instead of 6 Hyundai Sonatas.
But you could start a Hyundai Sonata rental company.
I could just rent them, lease them, make a little money on the side.
Just put them on Turo, and use the income from that to pay for the DBX.
That's the way to go. You got to buy six Hyundais, one Aston Martin, rent out your Hyundais to pay for your Aston Martin. That's it.
That's the money.
You figured it out, Sam.
Yep. And maybe on occasion put the Aston on Turo as well. Because what could possibly go wrong with putting your $200,000 British luxury SUV on some random
with its
personal peer-to-peer car rental site.
542 horsepower in Sport Plus mode that turns all the nannies off. Nothing could ever go wrong with that. Just handing that to a random person. Nothing.
Totally fine.
Nope.
Totally fine.
Yeah, Aston Martin's going to come out super duper awesome.
Yeah.
And just as a reminder for those who still think that the idea of an Aston Martin SUV is heresy, don't forget next year the Ferrari Purosangue. It's coming.
Yeah,
it's coming.
Yeah. All those 911 variants that you love, how Porsche can build a 911 variant for every single customer that's out there. Those are all paid for by the Cayenne and the Macan. So.
Yeah.
SUVs.
SUVs from these guys aren't going anywhere.
This is why the 911, the Gallardo, or the Huracan, the DB11. That's why those cars can exist, because there are people who will go and buy these SUVs, and that's what pays the bills.
So if you could do a DB11 or a DBX, which would you do?
11.
Oh, no contest. I would do the DB11.
Okay. So would I. I just had to ask since you mentioned DB11. I'm like, which impractical? I guess it's a little bit practical, the DBX, but okay.
No, I mean, my kids are grown. They can take care of themselves. I don't need to haul them around.
Yeah, they got.
And if I can afford an Aston Martin, I can have my stuff FedExed or just buy new stuff when I get to wherever it is I'm going. I don't.
You can have somebody else drive a car behind you with the stuff that you need and meet you wherever you want to be. Otherwise, you drive your DB11.
Have the valet drive the Range Rover with all the stuff. And when I get there, then I'm good.
You get yourself not the junker car. You get yourself a cheap car to drive around for your dogs. The beater. You get a beater. You get a 2004 Jaguar X-Type that, according to was it Carvana? I wanted to look up how much the Jaguar was worth to Carvana. $270.
Woohoo!
Yeah, get one of those, and you cram all your stuff in it.
The other day, I was looking up the value of my car, my Miata, on the Hagerty car evaluation tool, and then I looked on KBB, and on Hagerty it was like about $8,000 or something like that. On KBB, a 1990 Miata was like $500. It's like just a slight difference there.
Just take into account the sort of the enthusiast audience.
Taking into account the crazy of how much used cars right now, one of my husband's colleagues just bought a new car. I honestly forgot what he said he bought, but he traded in a 2008, 2009 Wrangler that had about 80,000 miles on it. He got $24,000 from the dealer for that car.
Wow.
$24,000.
This morning when I was walking the dog, I ran into one of the neighbors, and she was saying her daughter, she's got a 2006 Honda Accord, and she just had to put $1,200 into fixing something on it. I can't remember what. And she's been getting an itch to buy a new car. And I said, please tell your daughter, do not buy a new car right now. Wait until at least the end of the year, early next year. Just keep the Accord running for now, because there's nothing out there to buy. I mean, you're going to pay through the nose for anything good if you can even find it, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is right now. All right, Robbie, what about you? What have you been driving?
Oh, what have I been driving? Hold on, let me look. I've been driving the Mercedes-Benz E450 all-terrain wagon. It is a very, very fancy wagon, is what it is. It is, it's got 4MATIC.
So it's the Mercedes-Benz Outback?
It is the Mercedes-Benz Outback. Yeah, if you like, I kind of want an Outback, but I also want to go really, really fast. Or no, not just fast. I want to be pampered like I've never been pampered before. then you can get yourself the E450 4MATIC all-terrain wagon. I love wagons. I love station wagons. I love sport wagons. This is not a
Well, you wouldn't be allowed to write about cars if you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't. Hold on, I got crazy. Hey.
Does your dog not like wagons?
I don't
is
know.
He objecting, or is he
they don't get to go in the wagon, so they don't know.
All dogs love wagons.
I was unaware of the auto journalist wagon excitement when I started doing this, and when somebody asked me, "Oh, what kind of car do you like?" I'm like, "Oh, I like this." They're like, "Typical." I'm like, "What?
I don't get it.
I don't get it." It's an E-Class sedan that just happens to be a wagon. That's really what it comes down to. It it has the inline V6. Or inline V6. That doesn't make any sense. It has an inline 6 engine.
Was that the thing about being a poser? I mean.
I know. Good job, poser. It has the inline 6 turbo engine. It has EQ boost like pretty much every other Mercedes-Benz out there now. 362 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque, 9-speed automatic. It is smooth, and I don't even want to say butter. What's smoother than butter? Like whipped cream?
Melted brown butter.
Melted brown butter. It is so smooth. It has the little bolster, the little side bolsters that
like squish you.
That squish you as you go around corners.
Oh, the automatic ones.
Yeah,
that holds you.
Yeah, so it keeps you from sliding out of your seat, even though your seat belted in. I'm a fan of those because they're just so like I'm driving a wagon. I'm driving a station wagon. But thanks, Mercedes. Thanks a lot. It's got a nice wood interior. The dashboard has this nice wooden interior, which I'm sure it's probably a lot of money. Hold on, let me see what it is.
It's a lot of money.
I'm gonna look and see how much this interior. I don't see it. But it is so nice. You open up the rear and the cover like goes back automatically. Everything that you think a Mercedes-Benz would have as a wagon, you're gonna get in this car. It's all terrain apparently, which means you could probably take it off road. The version I have, it starts at $67,600. The one I have is $20,000 more. It's $87,700. So let's just say $90,000 for your very, very fancy station wagon. And it's a I feel bad because I keep saying it's a Mercedes, but yeah, it's a Mercedes. Everything about it, it's so comfortable. It's got the little pillow headrest, which I love. Like every time I drive a bunch of cars and then I get into an E-Class or an S-Class, I'm like, oh, now I remember why people spend so much money on these cars.
You know what I always love? The speakers. Who makes the audio, the radio? They have the speaker grills are always metal and they're perforated and have like they're the prettiest speakers.
Spiral pattern. Yeah,
spiral.
This like beautiful spiral pattern. It's like
a galaxy.
Ooh. Right. I'm like, I know this is literally just the cover on the speaker, but ooh, it makes the car look so fancy.
And Mercedes, they popularized the interior lighting accents.
Ambient lighting.
I always said it's a peppermill. Peppermill is it's like a red and blue. The peppermill is I would say maybe a slightly high-end Greasy Spoon diner in Las Vegas that every time I have to go to CES, I like to go to the Peppermill to eat too much food that has probably been deep fried for far too long. And yeah, I love driving around in Peppermill mode. Yeah.
Now I have to go to this place next time.
It is great. Go to the Peppermill. It is like a really fancy Denny's, is what it is. They have trees and stuff.
Denny's.
Yeah, it is like a fancy Denny's. You got to.
Is it in one of the hotels?
No, it's down at the end of the strip, past the famous Mexican, the taqueria that everyone goes to.
Oh my gosh! I just pulled up the website and the colors are
totally, there you are.
Like
yeah, that's the Peppermill.
It legit does look like ambient lighting.
Grab whatever device you have in front of you if you're not driving and look up Peppermill Restaurant.
Peppermill, Las Vegas. And as soon as it comes up, okay, I get it.
Yeah,
that totally makes sense.
Yeah, been driving it around. Mercedes-Benz's ADAS system is probably, without having hands-free or all the other like sort of level 2.5, etc., is one of the smoothest out there. Like of all the cars that I drive, and I try, adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist. Other than this one thing I'll talk about in a second, cut-ins, it doesn't like do crazy things when there are cut-ins. When people pull out in front of you, it's very smooth, sort of getting up to speed. But there is one thing, and that is Mercedes-Benz's idea of lane keep assist, where if you get too close to the edge, like it just shoots you back over, and it is jarring. The first time, the first, I don't know, 200 times you use it.
So it doesn't gently, shove you back into the middle of the lane.
No, it's sort of like, oh, what are you doing, buddy? You need to figure, especially if you're at the edge of the lane. So if you're pulling off the freeway, and like let's say there's some traffic, and you're sort of like pulling off just slightly ahead of where you should put off, where you're kind of going into the white lane along the edge of the road, it will adjust you. It will like no. But yeah, no, it is. I love this car that I cannot afford, and I probably wouldn't buy just because I can't afford it. And there are plenty of, well, not plenty. There are other wagons.
If you could afford it, would you buy this one? Like, say this is your price range.
I probably would get the V60.
Okay.
I probably get the V60. Just because I'm even if I were rich, I think I would still be a cheap, which I am, or thrifty or frugal. I don't know what the word is. I've never owned a new car.
Frugal sounds nice.
Yeah,
stingy.
Stingy. Yeah, the only new vehicle I've ever purchased was my Vespa. We did lease a vehicle that was new, but I've never bought a new car. It's always been used because I'm just like, oh, I can save a couple grand because it's cheaper to buy this, and it's less impact on the environment because the car's already out in the world and might as well get the most out of it. And I know how to work on cars, so if something goofy goes wrong, I'm totally fine. Well,
and I have never bought a used car in my life because I always want a new one. I just love the thrill of being the one who is the only one who ever in the history of ever drove it, except the guy who drove it 7 miles to get it from the assembly line into the parking lot at the dealership.
Yeah.
I have only ever got new cars.
I've only ever purchased used cars, so
But I do keep them forever and a day. I mean, it's not like I buy a new car every 3 years.
Yeah.
I think my cars I do have them for like 10 or 11 years, so I get my money's worth out of them.
The car we've had the least amount of time was our Mini Countryman, and I think listeners will probably understand why. Because
that's period.
You know why.
That's all you needed to say.
Yeah.
It's another one of those cars that's great to drive and terrible to own.
Exactly. It was. I think the seals were getting ready to go. The clutch was getting ready to go. It was when we traded it in for our BRZ, which is also used. We after we signed the paperwork and the gentleman got up and walked away, I leaned over to my wife. I'm like, that Mini's gonna explode. She's like, what? I didn't tell her the full extent of the issues that were creeping up on the Mini. That in like 10,000 miles, something bad was going to happen.
So now your poor wife is thinking, like, did we just kill that man by accident?
Yeah. And so, I'm all, that Mini is. She's like, oh, okay, cool. So
we're more like you, Nicole. I mean, we have bought used cars. Like I bought my Miata used, and I bought used cars for the kids. But for my wife, I've always bought her new cars, and I've owned some new cars, but we keep them at least 8 to 10 years. So I like having no car payment. Pay it off and then just keep driving it for many years.
Those are the gravy years.
Until it's discovered that the manufacturer cheated on the emission controls and offers to buy it back for you for several $1,000s more than its market value.
You're like, sure, take it.
All right.
Yeah.
And then every car I think I've ever traded in, I've known what I wanted, but then by the time I get to the point where I'm to the dealership, like I'm waiting for it to come in, and I always time it just right. So it's like, okay, the old car's working. In the 3 weeks it takes to get the one I want, it's like the muffler falls off, something starts misfiring, like the transmission starts to go, and I roll into the dealership kind of like, come on, baby, hold together, we're so close.
We're almost there.
We're almost there.
That was the Mini when we were like, okay, we got to get this. I'm filling it full of oil. I think I swapped out the plugs. It was fouling plugs like there was no tomorrow. I swapped out the
things
plugs.
Things are going wrong.
And they were just like, oh, okay, whatever. Yeah, it's a Mini. Here's, and then we were repeat customers. It was Shift, the people who just bring you a car and let you drive it around. If you like it, you get to keep it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you bought this from us? I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll give you an extra couple, I think they gave us an extra $800 or $900 or whatever for being return customers for it. And I was just like, oh, all right, cool. Get it away from us.
Yeah, when Volkswagen announced the diesel buyback program, my wife decided she wanted to get the Honda Civic hatchback, which was just coming out at that point. But the version with the ADAS features was several months late. Was launching several months later after the hatchback was launching, and so we hung on to the Jetta for another 6 months or so, and in that time period, right around the time they announced the buyback, actually, we had a wagon, a 2010 TDI wagon, and it had the panoramic moonroof, and so it's got this sunshade that can retract back, and open it up so you have the glass, or you can close it, to get a little shade. And one day my wife was in the garage getting ready to go somewhere, and she hit the button to put the sunshade back, and it went back, got back about halfway, and then one side stopped and the other side kept going. And and so she came back inside, told me what happened. I went out, looked at it, started Googling how to fix that, and it turns out that if you take it to a dealer to repair that, apparently it was a fairly common problem on those cars. And if you take it in to repair it, it's about $1,500. It's about $400 for parts, and about $1,000 for over $1,000 for the labor, because they basically have to rip the entire headliner out and all kinds of other stuff to do it. And I said, you know what? Forget that. I went out, got a box cutter, just ripped the thing out, cut out the remnants of it, went to AutoZone and got some window tint film and put it on the inside of the glass to give her some extra shade.
Done.
Left it like that until we turned it in.
So when we were for the Jeep Grand Cherokee L launch a few weeks back, they actually had us tour the facility, the factory where they build them. And at one point you can actually see the mechanism that is there just to make these, the sunroof, that slide open. And because they didn't have any of the headliner, it's all like, the innards of a car. And I literally looked at that and I was like, oh my gosh, that is a lot of mechanicals up under that headliner just to make that work. So when you were saying how much it costs, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see that, because it's all buried in there. It's like behind, you'd have to take all of that off to get to it. So I can see how it would be crazy expensive, and a box cutter and some shade film there, some film would do the trick instead.
This is why Tesla, for example, you can't get an actual opening sunroof on their cars. They just put a sheet of glass on there and glue it on, and hopefully it'll stay. But it never, it's never supposed to move.
Yeah.
But every once in a while they do. But we don't need to get into that.
Is it a feature or a bug?
Is it a feature or a bug? What did you drive this week?
Well, it depends. I mean, if it. Let's see. I had the Mazda CX-9 Signature, which is. I haven't driven this particular configuration before. It's the 2021 CX-9 Signature all-wheel drive. It has the 2.5 liter turbo, which is a lovely engine that I really enjoy. And this is Mazda's biggest vehicle. It's their big 3-row crossover. Saying that, it's not quite as big as, say, for example, a Hyundai Palisade or a Kia Telluride. So it's one of those ones that's kind of an in-betweener. That's maybe I think closer in size to the Kia Sorento than the Telluride. So it's got that third row for emergency use for smaller people, but it's definitely not somewhere where you would want to relegate your your closer adult friends. It's definitely a little tight in that third row. And this version, the Signature, comes with second row captain's chairs and a really nice second row center console. So it's definitely it's a 6-seater. But as with all Mazdas, it's got a lovely interior. The Signature is the top of the line model. So you've got leather trim on the dash, and everything is really well executed. It looks like a significantly more expensive vehicle than it is. It looks like it's got the kind of interior that you would expect from a Volvo or an Audi, or even a Mercedes-Benz. And that's what, that's the direction Mazda's been going in recent years, trying to get that more premium feel in their vehicles. The 227 horsepower is it's a great engine, 310 pounds-feet of torque, but in this bigger vehicle, that's kind of the limit of what it's capable of. So it's got, more than adequate performance, but it's definitely not what you would call a sportier crossover. It's not quite up there with what you would get. Again, I'll use the Sorento as an example. Their new 2.5 liter turbo that they have is actually feels quite a bit stronger than the Mazda engine. It's about 270 horsepower, I think. But the Mazda does have plenty of torque. It's a 6-speed automatic, all-wheel drive, 20-inch wheels. It's a very handsome-looking vehicle, but it's also now pretty much the oldest model in the Mazda, remaining in the Mazda lineup now that the 6 is gone. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the CX-9 get replaced in sometime in the next 12 months with a new version. But if you're looking for something now that you don't need quite as much interior volume as what you would get in the larger 3 rows, like I said, like the Telluride or the Palisade. You want something that's got a little bit sportier feel to the driving dynamics. This is definitely a good one to take a look at. And the MSRP on this one was $46,605, and with delivery and the extra $500 for the machine gray metallic paint, it came to $48,200, which is right in the ballpark of what you would pay for the high-end versions of those Korean crossovers. The 23 miles per gallon EPA rating combined, again, is in the same ballpark, despite only having 2 less gears in the transmission. Because it is a little, slightly smaller, slightly lighter than those vehicles. So it does okay. I think I got about 21 with it during my driving with it for a week. So it's definitely, worth taking a look at if you're something, bigger than, like on the upper end of the mid-size segment. Let's put it that way as a descriptor. So. Cool. That's the 2021 Mazda CX-9 Signature.
On their website for pictures of the interior on the gallery, the person getting into the third row is a child.
Yes.
Like they have a photo
that makes
of
sense.
A child getting into the third row because it's just sort of, I feel like a lot of these third rows are just there because people want to, I have a third row just in case. And I think
I mean,
or I have a tiny child.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, if you've got a child that small, they should probably be in a child seat anyway, or a booster seat, which means that you don't want to have to deal with that in the third row. Putting them back there in the third row into a booster seat. That's so you're really better off. And in fact, I ended up just folding down the third row because I had to go get some stuff, not mulch, but I had to go pick up some stuff with it and. And so I just folded down the third row and left it there, because this is not the kind of vehicle I would want to put mulch into. So I enjoy driving it. It's like any Mazda. It is an enjoyable vehicle to drive. It inspires you to want to go places.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the CX-9, and I do think that third row, like you said, is very much in this one is sort of a token third row. I mean, no one really wants to ever in any vehicle sit in the third row, but this one is definitely on the tighter side. I feel like it's the kid who's not in the car seat anymore, but still, that junior high kid that can crawl back there, doesn't need the car seat, but can still get back there and not feel like they're squished. But it's not something that you would want to ride in for very long. And I have no idea how you would get a kid back there, like a little kid in a car seat. I feel like you would have to be a contortionist or under 5 feet tall to be able to get halfway into that, buckle them in, and scoot yourself back out again.
That's pretty much it. But if you're, if it's you and your partner and another couple, it is and you fold down that third row and you maybe going for a weekend getaway, you can put all your stuff in the back. You've got lots of room for whatever you need for the weekend or, for a road trip. And, whoever's in that second row is going to be very, very comfortable, in those captain's chairs, and they've got that center console in there. So I think, it's definitely a really good combination for that sort of use case.
Yeah, it is. And they do really, like you were saying, they have a beautiful interior. They have a striking interior. It is right up there with cars that are significantly more expensive in terms of the comfort and the quiet of the cabin. They're always very quiet. You feel very insulated from the road, from the traffic, from the wind noise. If it's like rainy and windy, you don't hear it like you will in some other vehicles. So it definitely captures that luxury car vibe as a passenger. It nails it.
Yep. One thing to note, if you are among the part of the population that is averse to center control knobs for your infotainment system as opposed to a touchscreen, then this is definitely not the vehicle for you, because Mazda does not believe in touchscreens. They think it's a bad idea, and I'm inclined to agree with them. But so you will have to learn to deal with that center control knob, but it does work well. So. I
hate it. I don't like it. I want a touch screen. I don't care. I don't care that you don't like them, Sam. I want a touch screen. Every time I use the control knob, or I feel like I'm spinning, like I've got. I want a touch screen. Period. The end. That's what I want.
All right. Whatever. You can have your touch screens. You can have your touch screens. We'll agree to disagree on that one.
Okay.
I think a happy medium is a well integrated voice control system. But
look at you being the peacemaker, Roberto.
Yes, I think a good
and actually,
because you don't have to take your hand off the wheel. You just say things. Give me the thing I want, and give it.
But only if it hears what you're saying. If you say "give me the thing" and it's like, "No, I'm going to give you this other thing," then it's no good at all.
That's why it has to be like a good one. It can't be a
good one. Yes.
Yeah. One that they'll have to test them on Nicole though, because apparently none of them understand.
Nothing hears me, right? None of them understand, which is why I'm a touchscreen fan. I just sort of reach out, touch the screen, show it where I want to go. I don't want to have to tell it the same thing 10 times or spin a goofy dial for an hour and a half.
All right. Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. Speaking of touchscreens, Volvo this week had a tech moment event where they talked a lot about the technology that's going to be coming to their upcoming vehicles, and most of pretty much everything they talked about is actually going to be launching next year on the replacement for the XC90, which apparently will probably not be called the XC90. Evidently, Volvo has decided that alphanumerics, as they move to all electric vehicles, they can ditch those and actually adopt real names, which will be interesting because Volvo's never actually done that in its history. It's always had some sort of alphanumeric designator for everything it's ever built, going back to its origins in the 1950s. So I will be curious to see what Volvo comes up with for a name for this one. But it's going to be an EV. It's going to have standard equipment equipped with all of the sensors it needs to eventually do some form of level 4 automated driving. Although that will not be a feature that will be available from day one on the car, but it will be available later on with over-the-air updates, as they say. So someday, maybe possibly within the life cycle of that car, maybe it'll actually get that capability. But it will at least use things like the LiDAR sensor to enhance the pedestrian detection and other capabilities for the driver assist features that it will have at launch. And they dropped a concept called the Volvo Concept Recharge. What do you guys think about this thing?
I think it looks kind of cool. Actually, styling wise, I like how they changed the front. They have what they call that Thor's hammer headlight design. And I always think it's so cool. Like whenever I see one behind me at night, I can tell it's a Volvo behind me because of little Thor's hammers. They kept that. That's kind of neat. Yeah. So like they changed it up. They gave it more like a closed, like there's no grill, it's flat. But I like that they did that. Also, I need to point out that there's a large 15-inch standing touchscreen. I just
yes, I'm aware, and that's using the Android Automotive system that's also on the Polestar 2 right now.
Mm-hmm. I am a fan. So, I like it. I like that when they announced that they were going to give it a name, they were like it'll be a name like a child. Like a child, like you name a child was sort of like the theme they were going for. So this is like their child apparently, and all the gas vehicles ahead of it were its parents, and now it's the next generation. Remember when Pepsi had the choice of a new generation? I think that's kind of what they're going for. This is the new generation of Volvo, and it's electrified and it has names like Kyle or Susan. I don't think those are very good car names, but maybe.
Sven.
And they're also not very Swedish.
They're also very
Magnus.
Yeah. Magnus.
The Volvo Magnus. There you go.
The Volvo
Magnus. I could get behind that. That's pretty cool.
The Volvo Magnus.
Or the Henrik.
Volvo Magnus.
The Henrik. I know.
No, because there's Henrik Fisker. You can't do that. There's already a guy at a car company with that
Volvo's,
name.
Well, yeah, but he used his last name, not his first name. So,
I know, that's true. But
Henrik
I think
Green
of,
is the
Henrik,
CTO
I think
at Mazda.
Fisker.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't think of
Volvo.
him. I think of Henrik Fisker. I don't know why, but you say Henrik and I think of Fisker.
Well, yeah, he was.
or
Haken.
Haken Samuelsson is the CEO of Volvo. Yeah. Let's call it the Volvo Haken.
The Volvo Haken.
That seems so anti-Swedish, though. To put a spotlight on yourself as a Swedish individual is so not Swedish at all.
That's wrong.
That they were like, no. I'm sure someone floated the idea, like an American PR person. What about the Hagen? No.
No. We don't do that.
They just turned off his Zoom channel. Like, no.
That connection. Quick.
That will not be. We will not be discussing that any further.
I think what's interesting about this concept, at least, I'll be curious to see how close this is to the production model. Compared to the current XC90, it's got a much lower roof profile. It was a shorter greenhouse, and the current XC90 is much more upright design, and this looks more like a cross between like the V90 and somewhere between a V90 and an XC90. Maybe closer to like the V90 cross country model. Mm-hmm. So it's more traditional wagon like, but taller. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with this.
Looking at the concept and the greenhouse, I think the issue you have with the Polestar 2 will rear its head again in this vehicle, because if you look at the interior shots, the headrest, the bottom of the headrest is almost parallel with the window sill, the top of the door.
Very high belt
line. So your belt line is going to be really high, so your arm's going to be up there again, which I know you're not a fan of.
No.
So that might be an issue going forward with you and Volvo vehicles. Is that? But I like the idea is that they are. It was funny during the tech event. Well, not funny, but it was interesting. That they were talking about, people kept asking about, well, is this going to be level 3? Is it going to be level 4? And Volvo kept like sort of waving that off. And like we have two things. We have supervised and unsupervised. And that's how they're looking at, because, what is the difference between level 3 and 4? And like, what if this is, and then you get into this weird gray area between level 3 and 4 as an OEM. And so I think they're just like, what, we're not going to deal with that sort of, the ambiguity. Like, it's either supervised, that means you're driving, or it's unsupervised, the car is driving. And of course Volvo, they were also, they reiterated the fact that they are responsible while the car is unsupervised, which means it's driving itself, and it gets in an accident, they're at fault, which is pretty.
I really like the idea of them saying supervised and unsupervised, because truly, to the average person, you say level 1, level 2, that doesn't mean anything to anybody, and someone's going to have to like literally Google what the heck that means, try to get some definitive understanding of that, and then sit down in a car. But if you say supervised, most people are going to get, okay, I got to pay attention. If you say unsupervised, it makes sense that, okay, no, I could read a book. Like that's really a much better way to say it, something that the average person can understand, as opposed to someone who has to be somehow in the industry to understand what all these various levels are.
Because you're always, as a writer, always having to explain what level 3 is, or level 4 is, or level 2 point. Like, it's a level 3, and then you have to like spend like 5 graphs breaking down the difference between, or you show them that SAE, like the new graphic that they put out a few years ago.
Right. You have to come up with some way to couch like, oh, it's a level 3, which means this, which is better than a level 2, which isn't as good as a level 4, and you've just spent 5 paragraphs to explain one thing, because it's that complicated and convoluted, as opposed to unsupervised, supervised. Like that would simplify that whole thing and probably be way better for people to understand.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And this has been a challenge for a long time, ever since the level taxonomy came out. That was developed by engineers for engineers. It was never intended to be a marketing label that was applied.
Yeah,
and you're right, Robbie. They were very scrupulous during the presentation and the Q&A about not using those terms, and I like that. And for what it's worth, the day after the event, I had a chance to talk with Eric Kohling, who is the head of product for Zensact, which is the division of Volvo that is doing all the software for this stuff. And they're working closely with Luminar, the LiDAR manufacturer. And he clarified that, at launch, it will only have supervised driver assist. The unsupervised capabilities will come at some later date, if and when they feel that it is safe enough. So it is very consistent with Volvo's long-term philosophy of focusing on safety. They're not going to release an unsupervised system until they are really confident that it will actually be safer than the human driver. And right now, it doesn't look like they don't think that's going to be the case in 2022 when this vehicle launches.
Yeah, you're not going to get a beta, and you're Henry Green is going to be on Twitter like saying, "Hey, the beta will be out in 2 weeks." That's not going to be a thing.
Maybe
you're going to
promise. Definitely, and promise in 2 weeks.
Maybe it's probably and for reals this time, guys. Yeah. We're gonna have
for reals.
For reals.
This stuff turns out to be a lot harder than we thought. Who would have known?
Yeah.
Who could have guessed?
Who'd have thunk it that being as smart as a human behind the wheel was gonna be tough.
A tricky thing to figure out.
And, the LiDAR, cameras, radar, redundancy. When you come to these things, you need redundant systems, and these, having all three of them on a vehicle is incredibly important, because you're talking about people's lives, and not just the lives of the people in the car. You're talking about the lives of the people outside of the car. Because if your car can't tell the difference between, say, a horse and a dog, or because it's too far away, because it's just using photos, or it's just using cameras, or it has difficulty in bright sunlight, but you feel you've been complacent, you've been lulled into complacency because it's worked for like the last 6 months without any problems, and then one day you're driving straight into the sun and now it's not working and you don't know what to do. That is because cameras have, well, the issues that cameras have. All these sensors have some sort of issue. Their strengths, and there are weaknesses in every single one of these sensors, and you want the redundancy so that the weakness of one sensor is taken over by the strength of another, as opposed to just let's just do it with one thing.
Yeah, and in addition to the sensor redundancy, you also need computing redundancy. One of the things that with their new platform that's going to be used for this vehicle, Volvo is moving towards centralized computing. Cars, high-end cars today can have upwards of 100 electronic control units scattered around the car, and they're starting to consolidate that. And Volvo is taking control of a lot more of the software away from their suppliers. As they integrate that, they're going to have two central, what they call their core computers in this thing, that are each powered by the NVIDIA Orin system on a chip, which is a really high-powered compute device. It does 250 trillion operations per second, which, for comparison, a couple of years ago, I talked to Brian Selesky, the CEO of Argo AI, and he was the head of the software effort on the Carnegie Mellon team that won the DARPA challenge in 2007. And I asked him how much compute power they had in that thing, in that Chevy Tahoe. And he said that thing was running 10 Intel Core 2 Duo chips on blades. And so that had roughly about 1.8 billion operations per second. So this thing, the Orin, a single chip, has about 500,000 times the performance of what was in that
wow.
in that car that won the DARPA challenge in 2007. And
so how many?
And with that, they still can't do the full self-driving at the beginning.
It is. You still can't do it. It's tough, but it feels like whenever I hear an automaker is sort of doing the due diligence. Oh, sorry, that's a hard. Doing the due diligence in order to make this a reality. I feel a lot better about I guess autonomous driving, level 4, whatever you want to call it, unsupervised driving in the future, because the worst part, and most of this is still going to be on the highway, but the worst part of driving is when you're not driving, which is commuting. Commuting's not driving, commuting's just standing in a very long line. That's what commuting is in order to get to work. What are you doing? I'm sitting in a long line listening to podcasts on my way to work. Sounds like fun. No, it's not.
That's an accurate description of what a commute is.
It is not fun. I'm tired of listening to this person go on and on about whatever that podcast is about. It's breaking our brains.
Well, then you should be listening to the Wheel Bearings podcast.
You should be listening to Wheel Bearings. If you're going to be stuck in a long line on your way to work, you should be listening to a podcast about cars. So we can tell you, like, hey, it's going to get better. We swear. I mean, not next week or maybe next year, but soon. Well, not
eventually.
soon.
But eventually. We promise. Someday.
Things are going to be.
All right. From cars of the future to cars of the past. This week, the organizers of the Concours d'Elegance of America, which is here in Detroit, it's one of the 4 big Concours classic car shows in the U.S., along with Pebble Beach, Amelia Island, and the Greenwich Concours in Connecticut. They had a press conference. The event was recently acquired by Hagerty, the car insurance company. Or actually, they don't just do car insurance. They do insurance for all kinds of stuff, but they focus on classic cars, boats, various other things. Anyway, they acquired the show, and Mikhail Hagerty, who is the CEO of Hagerty, announced that next year, right now the show for the last about 8 or 9 years has been in Plymouth, Michigan, which is a town about 15, 20 miles west of Detroit. Before that, for the 30 years before that, it was up in Oakland County, north of Detroit, at Meadowbrook Hall. It's going to be moving into Detroit proper next year for the first time. And it's going to be at the Detroit Institute of the Arts. So in the area around the DIA, this fabulous art museum, they're going to be having all these amazing cars on display there. And one of the things I've always liked about this show, this Concours, is that they have always been focused on trying to get really interesting cars, that will get people excited about cars. It's not, they're not precious about, cars, just having, the most highly restored, far better than they were new, classic cars, but they want really interesting cars, so some, in the past I think they were the first Concours to ever have a class for drag racers, drag cars. And that's always a perpetual favorite. And a couple of years ago, they had a class for rally cars, and they had John Campion was there. Unfortunately, the late John Campion, who died recently, he was there with several of his cars from his collection, including a Lancia Delta S4, a Rally 037, and several others. And Jim Glickenhaus has been a regular participant at the Concours of America. Hopefully he'll be back this year. One of the really interesting classes they've got this year that they announced, the design class, the special design class this year, which is going to be judged by a group of automotive designers, is the wedge class. So it's 1970s wedge cars, that cool design trend we had in the 1970s. So my friend Richard Truitt, who writes for Automotive News, he's going to be there with one of his TR8s in that class. There's, I'm sure that there will probably be a Lotus Esprit and maybe a Lamborghini Countach, but I'll be fascinated to see that. But what do you guys think about these sorts of shows like Pebble Beach and Greenwich and Amelia Island? Have you attended any of these, and what do you think about going to these events?
I've never been to it because there's nothing that's really close to me at all. They're always a pretty good hike, so I've never been to one. There's a lot of appeal to them, but I think they do, like you're saying, this one has like stuff for drag racing, and I think there's something to be said for having some more approachable cars. Like they don't have to be all these fancy, perfectly restored to the bolt thing from 1928 or whatever. Those are always beautiful, but it's kind of neat I like seeing cars that I feel like real people love and drive and loved and drove at some point, not just something that's been sitting in someone's garage as a showpiece. As beautiful as those are, I like the cars that were real cars, and once upon a time they were what we saw on the street, and everybody was driving or everybody was coveting them. So like the wedge cars you're talking about, which make me think of James Bond, every single one of them. I don't care I don't care. They're all James Bond cars. That's cool. I think that's kind of fun. And so I think these kinds of shows are neat. I think they keep an interest in the heritage of automotive design alive. And I think they're for people who are interested in automotive and interested in design. It's probably fascinating to see that, to be able to see how much things have changed, and to know that what they were making not 50 years ago, but 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago is very different than what they're making today. And there's always a chance to do something new and to iterate that design into something new and exciting. I think that's kind of cool.
I've been to Pebble Beach, I don't know, a bunch of times. And it's, on one hand, you're just like, okay, I feel like I've seen this Model T again and again and again. There's a lot of cars there that it's the same cars over and over and over again, and it is someone with a lot of money who flew in on a private jet, and this car was trucked in and is kept in a hermetically sealed vault somewhere with the humidity set at like the perfect, it's their Model T and their cigars, like both of them are kept in the same room. I think it's kind of
one common humidor for the cars and the cigars.
Yeah. So those they're fun to look at like once, maybe twice, but then you're just like, okay, this is a car that's, it was driven, 100 years ago. And now someone's just like been babying it for the last 40, 50 years. And there's a lot of cars like that, especially at Pebble Beach. I think Pebble Beach is where, you really go and you're like, okay, this is where all the fancy rich people put their money. But you do see, some weird older vehicles. I'm always fascinated whenever I see something from, like China or from Russia, but that's few and far between at Pebble Beach. And there's a lot of old Ferraris, which are always cool to look at. But once you see one old Ferrari, you see them sort of all. And so I'm more excited about the Concours of America, but it is in Detroit, which means I probably won't be going to it. I actually won't be going to Pebble Beach this year to the Concours just because it's scheduling conflicts. But having said all that, it's if you're a car person, going to these is outstanding because you are going to see the museum pieces, the cars that haven't been driven, the cars that are in like just ridiculous pristine condition. But you're also going to see like weird little things here and there that have somehow slipped in that the organizers are like, well, okay, let's let an MG midget in. Okay, we'll let one in that someone like took good care of, or maybe the Batmobile will be there, or maybe it's and there's always there's the cars in the periphery. People bring their cars, and sometimes you'll see some interesting stuff, and you can strike up conversations with people. A fun story I like to tell at Pebble Beach was I was talking to my friend about they had the Japanese cars for I think Infiniti had a Japanese cars they were showing off. And I was talking about my a 69 Datsun Roadster, my very first car, and I was trying to buy it back, and I wanted to buy it back and make it into an electric car. That's sort of my dream, is to buy it back from a friend of mine, make it into an electric car, have a little low mileage electric car to drive around my neighborhood. And this woman behind me, she heard me talking about the car. She's like, "Oh yeah, I had a 1600 and I had a 2000." I'm like, "Oh great!" And then I was sort of, kind of afraid to say, "Yeah, I wanna do a retro mod on it and make an electric car because I'm at Pebble Beach where everything it has to be exactly how it was when it came off the factory floor." And it turns out her and her husband own the EV conversion company in San Diego. That does all the Volkswagens and Porsches and stuff like that. So it was just like, a fun little conversation that I had with someone who was also a car person. And so, those things sort of pop up, and maybe you'll make some friends or some contacts or whatever. So those are fun, but you can also just go to a car show on your block if you're lucky. I think today is probably a good day to go to car shows at neighborhood parks. It's 4th of July when we're
Yeah, no, I'm sure there's plenty of good car shows around. I was just at a Cars and Coffee yesterday, where there was a very eclectic collection of vehicles, from old American muscle cars to modern supercars. There was a Lamborghini there. There was an early 2010s Porsche Cayman. Somebody had an original 1964 289 Cobra. There, not a replica, but the real thing. But again, one of the other cool things about the Concours of America, and with Pebble Beach, there's all kinds of other events that go on. They call it Monterey Car Week now. There's all kinds of other events going on around that that week, around that event. The event here lasts typically 3 days, and there's actually some stuff that goes on earlier in the week. But on the Saturday morning, the show is on Sunday. The official Concours is on Sunday, but on Saturday they have some cool events. There's a ride and drive program. There's a Cars and Coffee, and there's also the Concours de Lemons, which is specifically for beaters and all kinds of oddball stuff that you can bring. And that's those things are all free and open to the public. You don't have to have a ticket or buy a ticket for anything, which is fun. The whole event this year runs from July 23rd to the 25th of this year, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'll have a link in the show notes where you can buy tickets for the Concours if you're interested. It runs from 10 to 4:30 on 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on July 25th. Let's see what else. And there's also some on Saturday. There's some interesting seminars, on various topics that you might be interested in it. One of the cars that's going to be on display at the Concours is Black Ghost, a 1970 Dodge Charger that is in the Detroit Muscle Cars 70 to 71 class. And there's also another seminar on the Ferrari Monza, and they had one at the press conference. There's actually going to be 4 of these modern Ferrari Monzas at the show on Sunday. Wow. So lots of interesting things to do. All right. Next up, GM made an announcement this week. We've been hearing all kinds of announcements over the last 6-12 months about car companies getting into, they're going to be building all these EVs, and then they're going to be investing in building their own batteries. And of course, if you're going to build batteries, you got to have the raw materials for those batteries. And right now, for the batteries in EVs, we rely a lot on things like lithium and nickel and manganese and cobalt, and most of that stuff currently is not produced in North America. If they're going to produce batteries here, they've got to have the raw materials, and most of the lithium used in batteries today is mined in either South America or Australia. Most of it's processed in China, and then it's got to be shipped here to make batteries. And lithium is very common in the earth and in the environment, but there just hasn't been very much of it actually mined. And so GM is partnering with a company called Controlled Thermal Resources to produce lithium in Southern California from a geothermal field. And so this is kind of an interesting approach, because one of the challenges with producing the raw materials is you've got a lot of processing that has to happen, which in itself, in addition to the mining, actually takes energy as well. And so the Salton Sea in Southern California, they've been developing geothermal power production using the hot steam coming out of this geothermal field to run turbines to generate electricity. And what CTR is going to be doing, and they started prototyping this, and they plan to have a pilot production facility running by 2024, is to extract the brine, the hot brine from this geothermal field, separate the steam from it to run the turbine, and then use that electricity that they're generating. Some of it will be used to separate the lithium from the brine, and the rest will get fed back into the grid. And then once the lithium is extracted, the brine gets pumped back into the geothermal field. And so this is potentially going to be a very low cost, low carbon or no carbon approach to lithium production. And GM thinks that they can get all the lithium that they need for their North American production out of facilities like this. What do you guys think about mining and development of these resources in order to make this transition to EVs?
I mean, I think it's a good idea to come up with sources that are outside of the traditional means that we have right now. I mean, if we're going to have that many EVs, you got to come up with something else to get some of these products. Did they say, Sam, are they going to have to open a whole bunch of places like this in order to support the lithium that they're going to need? Or was this one, did they say like, this will provide us with 25%? Like, how many of these do they need to make that happen?
They're not sure yet.
Okay.
That's something they're still, this is still a process that's in development. I talked to Tim Grewe, who is the director of electrification strategy at GM, and at the end of the episode, I'll include the interview with Tim. We'll pat and paste that in here, but he thinks that by the end of the decade, they can be producing all of the lithium that they need for their North American production. And what they're trying to do is move towards localization of a lot of the resources. So for stuff they're doing in China, they'll get it locally in China. For stuff in North America, they'll do it here, and so on. Because that also dramatically reduces their transportation costs for moving all these raw materials around. So he does think that they can get all the lithium they need in North America by the end of the 2020s. But whether it'll all be from this facility or from a mix of this and other facilities, they don't know yet.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, it seems like they're what I appreciate is they're trying to come up with these processes that aren't as bad as the petroleum industry. I mean, we use petroleum for a lot of things, not just for gasoline. But you can just look at the Gulf of Mexico this week, where the water was on fire. So if we can reduce the ocean being ablaze, like it's the beginning of Pacific Rim, yeah. If we can find ways to sort of reduce our insane impact on the planet, and we're always going to have an impact on the planet regardless of what we do, but we want to reduce that as much as possible, because at the end of the day, if things go awry, it's not the planet that's going to go away. It's going to be us. The planet will be fine. The planet will just reset itself, and everything will grow again, and we'll be all gone. So when you really think about it, like being environmentally sane is for the longevity of the human race. How about that? And so if you can, as electrification becomes more and more the future of transportation, we got to figure out ways to make sure that we're able to source all this stuff without repeating the mistakes of the past, and I think this sort of helps.
Okay. So with that, why don't we move into some listener questions for this week? And we've got quite a few of them. So let's start off with Coach Cabrera. This is actually one from last week that came in after we recorded the show. Do you think the EPA and states will continue to tighten smog requirements to get older cars off the road? What do you think?
I think the EPA, it really comes down to the individual states, I think, still, especially with California. I live in California, so we have, the strictest emission standards in the country. And a lot of states sort of follow suit to whatever California is doing. Getting older cars off the road is a bit tricky, because you have to take into account that some of those older cars are used, not everyone can afford an EV. The average, if you're working class, it's fun to be like, hey, we all move to EVs and the Earth's going to be great. But that doesn't mean $35,000 for a car, even if it's, it isn't going to work for a lot of people. They still have to buy, these older vehicles, these gas-powered vehicles, and a used car is environmentally sound. Buying a used car is environmentally sound, because you're not having the initial cost of the building that car.
It takes energy to build a car.
Yeah, it takes energy to build a car. It takes a village, people, a village of energy. And so I think the old cars off the road, there might be another cash for clunkers type situation in the future. I was kind of hoping there'd be one like a an EV for clunkers thing, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But I think that's probably more what we're going to see, as opposed to taking older cars off the road. Now, reducing the amount of new cars that are gas powered, that's definitely going to keep happening.
Yeah, I think they'll continue to do it, not so much like you said, not to get old cars off the road, because there are people who are driving older cars because it's all they can afford. And if you need a used car, it's not going to be a 2020. It's going to be, if you're tight on cash, it's going to be a 2012 or something, and it's not going to get the fuel economy of anything that we're doing today, and it's not going to, the smog requirements that were existing then are totally different. And I think you have to be really careful of trying to do things that make the environment better, which is a worthy cause, but at the expense of people who still need to drive a car to get to a job that they really need and don't have a lot of options. But I think that tightening those requirements, it doesn't so much get older cars off the road sooner, but I think it does encourage automakers to continue producing cars going forward that will meet those and then some. Yeah. And I think it does that more than pulling cars off the road, because you can't, like you said, you can't just, okay, we're going to price everybody who can't afford something made in 2018 right out of having a car. You just can't do that. You impact people's lives and their livelihoods too much. So I think it's an admirable goal, but I think there's a certain balance that has to be found there.
Yeah, and as an example, the average transaction price on new vehicles recently hit just about $40,000, and actually this a couple of days ago we had the June sales announcements from the automakers, and Ford, for example, in their sales release said that their average transaction price in the first half of this year was up to almost $47,000. And that, in part, that's because they've discontinued all of their lower end cars. That they no longer sell the Fiesta and the Focus and the Fusion. So they're selling nothing but SUVs and crossovers and trucks now, which are all considerably more expensive. So they're the average price of a Ford vehicle is almost $47,000, which is crazy. Now that's going to go down. That average is going to go down later this year when they launch the Maverick, their small pickup, because that's going to start at $20,000. And they have also said that they're going to introduce some more affordable vehicles, affordable electric vehicles. So that'll help. But I think the vast majority of people never buy a new car. They buy used cars. You sell about 3.5 times as many used cars every year as we sell new cars. And so, most people rely on, affordable used cars. So I think it would be foolish to try and do something, certainly, you're not going to do anything retroactively that says, cars built before 2015, suddenly have to have, better emission controls than what they were originally built with. I mean, that would be crazy. Nobody could afford that. But what you might see is some states that don't currently have, emissions tests in order to register your car, like you do in California and some states where you've got to take a smog test. You might see some more states adopt those so that at least the older cars have to be kept up to the same standard as when they were new. But I think even that's going to be problematic because that's going to add costs for a lot of people that rely on those cars for transportation. And I think we're just going to have to, hopefully the industry will work to bring some more affordable EVs to market, which will eventually trickle down into the used car market and make those EVs more affordable to more people.
Yeah.
So let's see. Next up, Brianna Wu, friend of the show, who was on a couple of times way back, probably about 3 years ago now, asked, and Brianna is a fan of Porsches, and she's got, I think, 3 of them. I think she's got, or maybe 3. Yeah, 3. I think she's got an 86 or 87 911 Targa, a newer 718 Cayman, and also a 986 Boxster, the first gen Boxster. Says, do you think 986 Boxster prices will stay at the current level? Is it on the verge of becoming a modern classic? We've seen over the past year or two that a lot of cars, especially Porsches, have climbed dramatically in price. And the first generation Boxsters are still relatively affordable by Porsche standards, at least to buy, and maybe not necessarily to keep them running and maintain them. But what do you guys think?
When anything that's built in the 90s and the early 2000s right now is the prices are just ridiculous, and I don't see those prices going down at any point. I think Generation X is, we're getting a little bit of money. Some of the millennials are certainly, I think they're looking at these older vehicles as like, maybe Gen X may have looked at boomer vehicles before, but I think I don't see the prices of a Boxster going down, which is sort of funny because I remember a lot of people in the late 90s, early 2000s sort of like poo-pooing the Boxster. They're like, what is this? What is this? And now I think a lot of people kind of come full circle. We're like, the Boxster might be a nice car. You could convertible, drive it around. That'd be great. So
anything hangs around long enough and suddenly becomes cool again, and I think that's where the Boxster is right now. I don't think it's going to get any cheaper. I think people like them. It's going to stay there.
Yeah. And looking at the Hagerty valuation tool, for a 97 Boxster, that was the first model year of the Boxster, a Concours quality one, they currently value at $25,000, an excellent quality they put at $16,500. And the cool thing about the Hagerty tools, it does show you the change in value, the values over time, and the Boxsters have actually been fairly steady for the last 3 years. The price has been pretty flat, but they have had a bit of an uptick in the first half of 2021. And in fact, you can get a good one for, it says 9,800. So 10 grand for a Porsche is pretty cheap. Of course, parts are going to cost you a fortune, but that's not a crazy amount of money for a used car like this. But as the prices of 911s and other, particularly 911s, but other Porsche sports cars have gone through the roof in the last couple of years. I think more and more people are going to be taking a look at the Boxster as a viable option, and I would be shocked if these prices don't go up significantly in the next 12 to 18 months.
Oh yeah, they're gonna. Yeah.
All right. Also, another question from Brianna. There's a white 90s Toyota Supra just decaying on my block, and I want to give it a good home. And she wonders about whether it's okay to go and knock on the door and offer to buy it. What do you think?
I had what did I have? I don't know. I had a car, and I kept having people. I didn't have the money to fix it for a few months. I was in college, and I kept having people put notes on my car. Oh, it was my 90 Honda Civic hatchback, and this is like the late 90s. And I kept having people put notes on the car to buy the car with the phone numbers and stuff. And I wasn't like appalled or annoyed or anything. I was like, oh, well, this is an opportunity. If I ever want to sell it, I can. I think putting a note on the car might be nice. I saw a gentleman with an M3 a few years ago. Not a few years ago, like 6 months ago. I gave him my business card. I'm like, if you ever want to sell this, give me a holler. So I don't think it's out of the question to sort of ask people. And some, the idea of keeping a project car forever and never doing anything with it. A lot of people do that. They're like, oh, any day I'm going to work on this. Any day I'm going to work on this. Any day I'm going to work on this. And maybe that note or that knock on the door. I think right now probably a note would probably be safer just because people are still a little nervous about people coming to the door because of COVID. But I think a note might be the thing that sort of pushes them over the edge. And you're like, hey, I see this. Or if you ever want to sell it, please, be sure to contact me, sort of thing. So I don't see why anyone would be angry about that.
I'd leave a note or knock on the door, and why not? At the very least, what you're saying to someone is, hey, I love your car. You aren't looking to sell that by any chance. I mean, it's not like, hey, your car. If you were to say like, that thing's just falling apart in your driveway, could I buy that off of you because it's an eyesore? That's one thing. But hey, your car's really cool. Are you looking to sell it? I don't think anyone's going to get upset about that. It's all in how you present it.
Yes.
Totally agree. And like I said, if it's something that somebody just hasn't figured out what they want to do with, and you're willing to put in the effort to fix it up and get it running again, absolutely. I mean, it's better to have somebody that wants it and has the resources to do something with it than to just let it continue to decay.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, Coach Cabrera asks, are EVs considered a luxury car? A Model 3 feels very plasticky compared to a gas or hybrid car at the same price point.
I mean, it just comes down to who's building that EV. I mean, I've sat in the EQS, and that feels very much like a very futuristic S-Class. And, of course, the S-Class is the S-Class. It's the luxury of luxury cars. So I think it really comes down to the automaker and where they're positioning that car. I mean, Tesla's money has to go into batteries and motors. It doesn't really go all that much into the interiors. The interiors are still pretty sparse. They're not the sort of minimalism that you get in a Volvo. It's something completely different, and it doesn't feel very luxury when you get into a Tesla. And I haven't gotten to the new Model S Plaid, but it's really down to the automaker and where they're going to position that car now, I think.
I don't think they're flat out considered luxury cars, but I do think there's a even with a cheap EV, what could I think, like a Leaf or something, there's still a sense of exclusivity to having an EV. Not necessarily that it's a luxury car, but that if you have one, and now you guys, well, Roberto, you're in California and EVs are really popular. Here they're not. I'm in the Northeast and you don't see them like you do out there. So there's a certain sense of like, oh, they have an EV. That's unique, that's different. Not necessarily that it's a luxury thing, but just that, okay, you're thinking a little outside the box and that's kind of cool and it's sort of exclusive here, whether you're buying a Leaf or you're buying a Tesla or whatever. So there is definitely a different, I don't think they're considered luxury cars, but I do think a lot of people look at them as being sort of exclusive and different and unique, regardless of whether they have a plasticky interior or a really beautiful interior.
Yeah, I mean, when they first launched the Model S, it was fairly expensive and remains expensive to this day. And it was compared against a lot of luxury brands like, BMW and Audi and Mercedes-Benz, because it was at a similar price point to those vehicles. And, similarly, the Model 3, is in the same price range as a 3 Series. But I think just because something is expensive doesn't necessarily make it luxury. I think, luxury is something very different. You can have something that is relatively affordable, like say a Mazda, that feels more premium, it feels more luxury, but does not necessarily priced that way. And, conversely, you can have, something that is more expensive but doesn't feel like a luxury car. So, it's certainly a premium car based on its price point, but I would not, certainly the Model 3 or the Model Y, I don't think I would consider those to be luxury cars. But I think we will, start to see more affordable. We are going to see more affordable EVs coming to the market, over the next couple of years, that are much more mainstream, that have a similar price point. And another good example, the Chevy Bolt. Until the 2022 Bolt went on sale this spring, the refreshed Bolt, it was typically priced around $40,000, and nobody would call that a luxury car. Hey, see, Nicole, you gotta leave.
Yeah, I've got to bail. My mom's sending me a message. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but I got to bail.
All right, well, take care, and we'll talk to you later. We'll
Sorry,
wrap up
guys.
the last couple of questions here.
Okay,
Right.
Sorry about that.
Bye. No problem. The Bolt, a $40,000 Bolt is certainly not a luxury car. I think you got to separate price and luxury. They're two different things. All right. Yeah. Next up, AJ asks, is the Camaro going to survive? How did GM go into Colorado Canyon without a plan for an SUV off that platform? So it's really two separate questions. So first, do you think the Camaro is going to survive?
I'm surprised it's still around. It just get like, I just did a quick search, and I think the 2020 sales during the calendar year decreased by 38%. So it's
yeah. Well, I mean,
so
2020 was not a great year for
but
those kind of
it's
cars.
Also 30,000 units is not a lot of cars for a big company like like GM. So it's. Ooh, I don't know. I mean, maybe they might do a refresh. Maybe they might do a sort of another nod to the past a little bit to try to sort of get people excited about it, like people are excited about the Mustang and about the Challengers. But yeah, I'm sure there are people at GM right now who are like, what are we gonna do about the Camaro? Are we gonna let it like run out and then just not refresh it, or are we going to go all in and try to hit that nostalgia hit that everyone, we got the Nissan Proto, we got the the Mustang, we got the anything that's old is new again. Are they going to try that again?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Camaro is certainly not as old as the Challenger, and Dodge has managed to keep that one fresh with continuously more powerful versions of the Hellcat, and that thing's selling better than it ever has. So it's not it's not that an old car can't sell well, but this current generation Camaro has always it's never met expectations in terms of sales. As good as it might be in a lot of respects. I think that they'll probably keep it going for a couple more years. Basically just kind of chugging along with maybe some mild updates. And then, there has been some speculation that they might move it to an EV platform, make the next generation Camaro electric, which could be interesting.
Give it a lapse of a few years, let it just sort of go away, and then bring it back like the Hummer and make it an EV. The Camaro EV, muscle car, American Lightning, stuff like that.
It's certainly doable. I mean, we've seen other manufacturers do it. And what about the Colorado Canyon and the lack of an SUV off of that platform?
Anytime someone isn't making an SUV, I'm always wondering why. There must be some reason. I feel like because they're SUVs and trucks. They can charge a premium for almost the same amount of stuff as you have in a sedan. And so why haven't you done that? So I'm perplexed as well. Maybe you have some better insight as a former.
I don't know. I mean, there's no reason there was no reason they couldn't do it, and I think there's again, it's another one where there's been speculation at various times that they were going to do some sort of GMC off-roader, to challenge the Wrangler and now the Bronco, which they've never done. I mean, that would be the obvious platform to use as the basis for that. And for whatever reason, they've never given the green light to that program. I think again now, it's at the point where GM is going all in on EVs. I think that they're probably going to let the Colorado Canyon run its course. Do some updates to it over the next few years, and then if they're going to do that GMC Wrangler Challenger, then make it electric. Use the Ultium platform, and do like in the past with the Hummer, you had the Hummer H2 and the H3, which was off the previous generation Trailblazer platform. Do something similar with this one. Make a smaller Hummer. Essentially an electric H3.
Something that doesn't weigh 9,000 pounds.
Hopefully, yeah. All right, last question from Mike Enos. How long until the non-Tesla charging experience is good enough? And you've also had the chance to drive some EVs that are not Teslas, just as I have. What's your experience been like with charging at Electrify America, ChargePoint, EVgo, and when do you think they'll finally get their act together?
It's getting better. It is there's a progression of them getting better. I think the charge points and the sort of smaller companies that have been around forever, there wasn't a lot of EVs, so they're not getting a lot of money in order to make their systems better. Before, every time you went to a charge point, you had to have an account, you had to have this, you had to do this, and they're getting to the point where now they accept a credit card. Or if you have a Mustang Mach-E, I went to Electrify America. I just plugged it in, and it's getting there. I think there's some growing pains, especially for Electrify America. They're sort of the de facto challenger right now to Tesla's supercharger network. They're investing heavily and building out very quickly. But there have been a lot of growing pains. You hear stories of like, oh yeah, half of these Electrify America stations aren't working, or they'll get there and there's maintenance going on. So there are growing pains for these companies and for these charging stations. But I think they're getting there. I think we're probably about 18 months, 2 years before when you pull up to it's just Electrify America or any of them where it feels as seamless as a Tesla station. I think there's I'm giving them a little bit of leeway, but 2 years is a long time in the EV world, and at that point we're gonna have we'll probably have more EVs on the road. If you look at the roadmaps for a lot of OEMs, and so I think it's you have to be good enough. You have to be as seamless as gas, and I don't think they're quite there yet.
Yeah, I think the plug and charge standard, which EA was the first charging company to adopt that. Goes a long way in that direction. Right now, I've got a VW ID4, which we'll talk about next week, and I went to the EA station down the road yesterday to charge it up, and it like the Mach E, it also has support for plug and charge. And I pulled in the first charging stall I went to plug it into. I plugged it in, it wouldn't communicate with the stall. It just wouldn't. Said, sorry, can't do anything. Don't know what to do, and threw up some error code. So I pulled over into the next stall and plugged it in there. And I plugged it in, and it authenticated and just started charging automatically. I didn't have to mess around with anything. The car was already set up on the EA network, and it took care of it. And that's the way it should be. EA has had some issues with one of their suppliers of charging, the actual charging equipment, and they have stopped doing business with that particular supplier, and they're going back and retrofitting a couple hundred of their stations with new chargers from a different vendor, the vendor they've been using, that they used for the rest of their stations, and hopefully that will take care of it. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue that all of the charging providers, and we're actually working on scheduling, getting somebody from ChargePoint on the show probably in a couple of weeks to join us to talk about some of these problems. And so we'll dive in a little deeper into that. But as we start to get all these EVs coming to market, the charging providers really need to get their act together and make sure that those things are working all the time. That they have to be as reliable or more reliable than gas stations.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, people aren't going to want to buy EVs.
Yeah, and the issue for a lot of them is that Electrify America, all these, they actually have to have the car in their shop in order to make sure that the software handshake between the car and the charging station works. It's not like, you just build a car and you just take that car to the gas station, you put gas in it. Like, there has to be a connection between that vehicle and the charging station in order for the whole system to work. And every car is a little bit different, and so they have to bring these cars in and make sure that they work and then send it back to the automaker, or they have to fix their end. It's a bit more complicated than just like, here's a car, plug it into the wall like you would your phone. You're like, no, not really.
Even that doesn't always work. I mean, I've had issues with that too, where I've had cars that I plug in, and as soon as I plug it in, it'll trip a circuit breaker or trip a GFCI outlet because there was an issue again with the communications and what the car was trying to pull. So even home charging, there are issues. But yeah, I mean, you go to a gas station, you stick the nozzle in the hole and pull the trigger, and it starts flowing. The pump, the gas pump, doesn't care what kind of car it is, as long as it's got the right size filler neck and you can stick the nozzle in there. Mm-hmm. But you've got a lot of communications going on back and forth between the car and the charger, both to authenticate the car, figure out which car it is so they can bill you correctly, but then also because not every car will accept a charge at the same rate. So the car has to tell the charger, okay, I'm good for 125 kilowatts, or I'm good for 350 kilowatts, or I'm good for 150. And, because you can't, the charger can't pump in more electrons, pump the electrons in faster than the battery in that car can accept it. So there's all these things that have to be negotiated between the car and the charger before it all works. And so there's hardware issues, and there's a lot of software things that have to be worked out. Yeah. And in the case of Tesla, they're, because superchargers only work with Tesla vehicles, it's a lot easier. It's kind of like with, Apple Macintosh versus Windows. Apple only has to support one brand of computers with their operating system, with Mac OS or iOS, with their devices. And, Microsoft has to support hundreds of different brands of computers with all kinds of different hardware configurations. So it does become more of a challenge, but hopefully we'll get it sorted out. All right. That's it for this week. Thank you very much. Keep listening right after this for my interview that I did with Tim Grewe, the Director of Electrification Strategy at General Motors, about their partnership with Controlled Thermal Resources to manufacture low-carbon and low-cost lithium in California. Robbie, any last thoughts?
No, have a good week, people. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Talking today with Tim Grewe, the Director of Electrification Strategy. I believe that's the correct title, right? At General Motors. And Tim, thanks for joining me today. You've just announced this morning that General Motors is investing or partnering with, I don't know if there's actually an equity investment, in a company called
Controlled Thermal Resources, yeah.
Controlled Thermal Resources, yes. Thank you for that.
I didn't mean to jump in on you. Sorry. I
appreciate that. And the goal is to start localizing production of lithium, which obviously, with the announcements that GM has made of its plans for cell production over the coming years. Now you're up to 4 plants through your joint venture with LG Chem, which is LTM Cells LLC. That's a lot of batteries. That's going to require a lot of lithium. And currently, most of the lithium that's used in batteries, I believe, is sourced primarily from South America and from Australia, and most of it, as far as I know, is processed in China. So what is the advantage for GM or for any automaker with trying to localize lithium production, both the mining, extraction, and the processing of lithium for batteries?
Yeah, so with anything, when you're dealing with a high volume manufacturing situation, we basically have a situation where we want to do the best value with the highest quality for our customers. And so if you look at this investment, it's really to accelerate the innovation of this, lithium extraction and purification. And if you look at, CTR, Controlled Thermal Resources, right, they have a very novel process with very low carbon footprint from a geothermal lithium field, where you can take this geothermal brine and then you can directly extract the lithium from it. And it's high quality lithium. And so we're always searching for the best innovations in the value chain here to get the best lithium at the lowest cost within the region of manufacture. And so we're going to make a lot of vehicles in North America, and it's a very natural thing to have us, invest in this. Now, it's not finished yet, right? This is truly an innovation investment. And more importantly, it's a commercial collaboration to say, well, how do we work together to take the best of their experts plus the best of General Motors experts to really drive this cost of lithium down on this direct extraction process? And so, and interrupt me, Sam, if I'm going on too long, but I just love talking about this stuff. It's really, it's really all about, how do you, find these fundamental differences where there are no tailings, right? It's low carbon, but it also is not weather dependent, as many mining operations are. And so you can run 24/7 in a continuous process to feed the plants. And they've got a great leadership team there with a great technology that we'll go then try to enhance and accelerate. And, we're really talking about bringing on a very revolutionary process in 2024 or sooner, just to support our EV and autonomous vehicle, 2035, zero tailpipe emissions goal of General Motors. And so I always like to say, we say what we do and we do what we say. And when it comes to this is an example of what I call the continuous innovation that GM does. If we look at our innovation, we have continuous innovation where we're working on the supply chain, we're getting more operating equipment efficiency, we're really bringing this cost down and keeping this quality system up. And that's coupled with our breakthrough innovation, with like the Ultium platform is an example of that. And then it's our true next generation innovation coming forward, where this lithium can feed even into the next generation cells in the future. And so this is a great example of some core continuous innovation that GM's the first one to invest in to try to accelerate it to get it to be reality as fast as we possibly can.
Yeah. So last fall, when Tesla held their battery day, they talked about doing localized lithium production as well in Nevada, and they talked about a process where they dig up clay, mix it with salt, extract the lithium, and then put the clay back in the ground. Can you talk a little bit more about the process that CTR is using? Because I think it's quite different from what Tesla is doing.
Yeah, but the fundamentals are the same, right? I mean, the lithium is mixed with undesirable material, and essentially, how efficiently and how low carbon you can pull that out of that undesired material and purify it is what you're looking for. And so, I don't work for Tesla. I'm not a Tesla expert in any way, but in general, when you deal with clay lithium, you described it fairly well, right? You've got to dig it up. You've got to put it through some type of a salt or a solvent to separate it, and they have to return that material. And the great thing about the CTR process is with the geothermal brine, they've got a very innovative technology that directly gets that lithium out of there without additional steps. And that's why we are investing in it, trying to accelerate it. And, it's to the point now where their prototypes are working well. We've got the lithium in. We have good results from their lithium on the testing we've done so far with it. But we have to be very diligent and disciplined moving forward, because lithium is the main transporter of these electric vehicles. If you kind of get to the fundamentals of the electric car, the lithium ion will release an electron, let it run through a motor, and then return it back into the lithium ion back and forth, hundreds of thousands of times throughout the life cycle of the vehicle. And so we have to make sure that this lithium is pure. We have to make sure there's all this longevity associated with the purity of the lithium. And we have to also make sure that as we scale this thing up, that we can keep that 24-hour operation running, and that it doesn't break down and it doesn't have high maintenance intervals. And that's part of the breakthrough innovation that we're working with CTR on, to say, well, it looks really good now let's go make it a reality. And you can imagine these industrialized plants, right? I mean, they are just massive plants that you have to ramp in to improve every step of the way, that you can keep that quality up and that 24-hour operation running with no breakdowns. And so that's the phase we're entering now, that we're trying to accelerate, even before 2024, to say we can really outdo a traditional mining technique, which is, as you described, right? Dig it up, separate it, clean it, and then put the tailings back in. And this is all just direct, where we pull it straight out of the geothermal brine.
So how much, for a typical lithium ion battery, I mean, how much actual lithium do you need, like, say per kilowatt hour of battery capacity?
Oh, that's a good question. Remember, if you do it in kilograms and things like that, it's a very light metal, so it's a little bit deceiving. If I would say, it's by weight, it's a relatively small percentage in a battery. But by purpose, it's the main transport medium. And so, you want to make sure that it's pure, there's no impurities in it, and that it can transport throughout the life of the vehicle through the separator and through the electrolyte. It's a relatively low number when it comes to, the cell, the foil, the electrolyte, the binders that you put in there. But it's got a very important job to do throughout the life of the battery.
Well, I guess, right now, Ultium Cells has announced plans for 4 plants with, I think, roughly 140 gigawatt hours a year of capacity, to support those 4 plants, and presumably there will be more at some stage. How many tons of lithium would you need, for that capacity of batteries or cells?
Yeah. I don't have that number off the top of my head. I'll tell you, a lot of that number is going to change throughout the year as we get more efficient with how we use this stuff. Quite frankly, now we have a little bit of reserve lithium in our cells to make sure it lasts the life of the vehicle and in secondary use. And as we get better, we're going to try to do our best to reduce that. But, it's tons and tons to make that happen. And the good news is the Imperial Valley there has got a lot of supply, and it could feed many, many of our factories.
So with that first pilot plant, I guess it's a pilot plant that's expected to be up and running in about 2024. what do you see as the time frame when you might be able to source all the lithium that you need, at least for your North American facilities, locally, or in North America? Is that something this decade?
Yeah,
maybe into the
as
2030s?
fast as we. Oh, way before then.
Okay.
I mean, we're moving fast at General Motors here, okay? And so it's all just, well, how do you make prudent investments? And we invest as soon as we have proof that we have the confidence to make it happen. And I don't know if you caught one of our videos on the Hummer, but, we talk about revolutionary innovation. And it's not just the innovators that know how it is today, but it's how they can make it in the future. And so we're looking for these revolutionary innovators to say, we've got enough confidence to go take that next step and make that investment to industrialize this. And so far, it's worked out really well for us. Our joint venture with LG Energy Systems in Ohio, with this collaboration and this commercial collaboration, has yielded all kinds of efficiency improvements, all kinds of manufacturing detail that the GM manufacturing engineering group has brought to the LG Energy Systems manufacturing group. And we just are seeing multiple benefits from that. And so, started in 2024, if it does prove to be the best thing for our customers, we will ramp it fast and we'll get everything we can out of it, within a couple of years.
As you transition from, the NMC batteries you're using today in the Bolt and Bolt EV and EUV to NMCA for your Ultium cells, and then at some point to potentially to a lithium metal cell that you've talked about with the work you're doing with SES. Does going from NMCA to a lithium metal, how much impact does that have on the, aside from what you've already described in terms of the efficiency of using lithium, just that sort of transition, does that have much of an impact on how much lithium you need to use?
It always is a little more efficient when we do our innovation technology like that. And so if you look at the NMC to the NMCA, the aluminum doping basically gives you a better structure, so you don't have to overbuild the cathode as much to meet the life of the vehicle. And so that's a more efficient use of the lithium throughout the lifetime of the vehicle. As we move to lithium metal, we look to the same type of efficiencies to say it's going to get a little bit better. Now, categorically, it's not like it gets 50% better, right? We don't overbuild the cathodes by 50% today with extra lithium in there. It's more in the couple percent range that we do with that. And, as the energy density goes up and these actual battery packs get smaller, we had talked previously about the structure of the battery pack. Well, now that goes way down on the structural demand simply because the lithium cells are lighter and they take less space. And so you get a lot of these multiplying effects going together where, now the vehicle is actually a little less load on the battery as it's going the same distance, and you can get less lithium from that as well at the system level. And so I rambled on there, Sam, quite a bit with assuming a lot of familiarity with you and your listeners. I hope that wasn't gobbledygook for you.
No, it's good. And I'll put in the show notes, I'll put a little glossary about what NMC, NMCA, and lithium metal mean as well. So one last area, obviously, last year and particularly 2021 has been particularly challenging for almost every industry, particularly the auto industry, in terms of supply chain resiliency. Everybody's been exposed to challenges with silicon shortages, and so everybody's reevaluating how they manage their supply chains, where they're getting materials from. How with the shift to North American sourcing of lithium, how do you expect this to impact GM in terms of things like transportation costs and improving the resiliency of your supply chain?
Yeah, there's the obvious, reduction in transportation costs that is kind of one for one, and the cost of inventory as you're processing it, right? And you're not having to carry it on your books while you're turning it into a vehicle with all that. But more importantly, it's you also have to stabilize that material. Okay, so we call it lithium hydroxide or lithium carbonate. and you have to stabilize that lithium just to get it from place to place and to get it into a cathode active material manufacturing plant. The real innovation that we're going for here is to say, well, how do we fundamentally take steps out? Okay, so that we don't have to, have a 6-week shipboard type shipment type situation going forward. And by localizing it and centralizing it in the regions of sale, and Ultium's a global product, there'll be multiple regions that we manufacture this in. We always look to minimize the fundamental steps it takes to stabilize the material and get the high quality out of it. And so you can imagine that, in the bulk shipping and that it's not a huge burden today to put it across the oceans, and you save that. But the real benefit is how can you innovate your processes so you take steps out to have the material be high quality and stable, because it's just more local and there's less, transit time.
Do you see GM also getting into taking a more active or direct role in raw material sourcing for some of the other key materials in the cells, as some other OEMs have done, things like the nickel, the manganese?
Sure, and for sure. And if you look at what happens right now, I mean, we already have very well-established groups and well-established practice commercially and quality system-wise to go manage things like nickel, because we use it in our steel moving forward with that. And so that's part of the groups that we're expanding, but it's always, and that's why we use the term strategic investment and commercial collaboration, okay? Because we have to be humble. And, you mentioned clay processing of lithium, right? And, we think that the CTR method is much better and much more efficient and can run 24/7, but we may be wrong. And that industry is going to continue to innovate and move forward. And we always have to stay on top of this to have this agility to say, how are we going to get the best value for our customers to tie all this off and reach the bottom of that cost curve? We talked about, we're well under $100 at full scale on the Ultium system. We don't know the bottom of it yet. And it's because of that humility that we have to say, we think this is great innovation today. We want to accelerate it, but we want to keep it the best innovation of tomorrow. And if there's something else out there that's better, we're going to be agile and shift into it. And that's a very constructive way, especially in an expanding industry, right? If you look at our $35 billion investment that we're putting into this, it's all expanding in these areas. Okay. And so you don't leave people behind, you just move with them into the next better technology and the next better innovation.
And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you, Tim. This has been a great conversation, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, and have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.